Hello, third graders. Welcome to reading. Today, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be going over story elements, so parts of a story. So if you have a notebook at home and a pencil, take notes as we go through it. To start today, we're going to read a book on epic, and then we're going to be learning about characters. The book we are going to be reading today is Mr. Postmouse's Rounds. So you can read along with me. I'm going to read the words right up here. It's Monday, and Mr. Postmouse is starting his rounds. He carefully loads up his little wagon and sets off. He makes his first delivery to Mr. Bear, who has been waiting for a letter from his Aunt Ursula. So here's Mr. Postmouse, and here's Mr. Bear. Next, Mr. Postmouse delivers a large parcel to the rabbit family. Phew, nothing for Mr. Snake today, he thinks with relief. At the birds, Mr. Postmouse climbs up into the trees. Luckily, he isn't afraid of heights. It's a delivery of nuts for Mr. Squirrel as usual. Then it's time for lunch. Mr. Postmouse stops at his friend Mr. Dragon's for some barbecue. Mrs. Mole's package arrives safe and sound. Thank you, Mr. Postmouse. And it's a sweet treat for the ants. Down the lane, Mrs. Turtle unwraps 2 pairs of zippy roller skates for her mobile home. The Croc's house is just next door. It's so very humid. Mr. Postmouse lets nothing stand in the way of his deliveries. Gurgle, gurgle. Hello, Mrs. Octopus. Oh, look, it's a game of hide and seek in the coral. Ah, on dry land at last. A little note for Mrs. Fly, and next it's Mr. Wolf's turn. Shh! Mr. Postmouse tiptoes quietly around the Bat Sister's house. At the Penguin's place, it's winter all year long. Brr! Mr. Yeti receives delicious tarts from his cousin Yolanda. Bon appetit! Then Mr. Postmouse heads back down the valley. Whee! See you next time, mountain goats. Just a few more deliveries to make, and this one is a bit worrying. Now, there's only one parcel left. Who is it for? Surprise! It's for Mr. Postmouse's son, Milo. Happy birthday, my little mouse. So that is our book for today. So now we're going to talk about the characters. So in stories, our characters can be people, animal, or things. And sometimes we can tell just by looking at the cover of a book, if it has a picture, who the characters might be. Here we have James and the giant peach. And right here we can see characters on the book cover. Those are people, animals that are in the book, and also things. So here we have Pete the cat. That would be a character. The cat would be a character. Cat in the Hat would also be a character. But in the book we read, where we had Mr. Postmouse, we heard about him delivering all the packages. We read about Mr. Snake and saw a picture, Mr. Bear, Mrs. Mole, and Mrs. Turtle. And there are a bunch of other houses that he stopped at. All those animals were characters that make up the story. So remember, if you have your notebook and a pencil, make sure to take notes as we go along through this. So in our stories, we're going to have main and minor characters. Main characters are going to be the most important characters in the story. The minor character is going to interact with the main character, but doesn't have a big role. They play a tiny role in this story. So in our book that we read, our main character would be Mr. Postmouse, because if he wasn't in the story, it'd be a completely different book we read. But the minor characters would be Mrs. Octopus, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Snake, and Mrs. Turtle. Mr. Post Mouse interacted with them by dropping off packages and letters at their house. But they didn't play a big role. If they weren't in the book, it wouldn't make a huge difference. So they are minor characters. They interacted with our main character, but they didn't have a big role. Characters in our stories, they can think, feel, and act. So remember, Mr. Postmouse said he felt relief with no packages for Mr. Snake. So that's something he felt. And when he climbed up the trees to reach the birds, he wasn't afraid of heights. He said, "Good thing I'm not scared of heights." And remember, he tiptoed on the bat cave when he was walking over the bat sister's house. So these are all things that characters can do in the story. They're always doing something. And also our main character felt happy dropping off a gift for his son. So after we read a story, we want to be able to describe what that character did, what they thought, what they feel, how they were acting, so that way we can see what the character is doing. Because they're not just going to sit in a book and not do anything. We want to read and try to see if we can understand what they're doing. So to continue with describing a character, and this book helped because we had pictures in the book. Sometimes when we're reading chapter books, they're not going to have any pictures, so we can imagine the character in our head. So they're going to use adjectives in the story so that we can picture what is happening in the book in our minds. But we had pictures in this one, so we can talk about it. Let's describe Mr. Postmouse, our main character. He was careful and mindful, dropping off mail at everyone's houses. We could see that from when we read it. He is a mouse. We can see that from our pictures. In our story, he was wearing a white shirt and blue pants. He is the mailman for his street, and he likes to eat barbecue for lunch. So those are all things that we took from when we were reading the story. So today for our homework, what I want you to do is I want you to go on to Epic. I want you to pick out a book. So you get to pick whatever book you want to read. And as you're reading it, I want you to take notes on the characters in the story. Make sure you're looking at who is a major character, who is a minor character. Can you see how they are feeling, how they're acting, what are they thinking? Take notes, and then when you finish reading that book, I want you to write down in your notes also what book you read. And you can also pick a book from home. So if you have a book at home that you really like and you want to read, you can read that as well, but make sure you write down the title. And then for homework, go on to Edmodo. There's going to be a quiz, and I want you to tell me about the characters from that book. All right, and keep the notes as well because we're going to continue with our elements of the story. So then on Wednesday, we'll take notes adding on to the piece of paper that we wrote notes on today. All right, thank you and have a good day.